Part 72. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 721. He held the emerald-colored file in his hand and placed a cup of coffee in front of him. Outside the window was Shanghai with its tall buildings and busy traffic below. Hai Mei was repairing her nails carefully, and a few strands of hair fell down to her eyes. If she had looked through a layer of gauze, she would have thought it was the figure of a lady from a wealthy family, but he was indeed a man. Hoo-hoo. After repairing his nails and blowing them gently with his mouth, Hai Mei seemed very satisfied, but at this moment, the sudden ringing of the doorbell broke his tranquility. Putting the file in his pocket, James took a sip of the coffee in front of him. He didn't open the door because he knew the door couldn't stop that person. A ball of mercury-like liquid flowed from the crack in the door and climbed onto the chair in front of Hai Mei. The liquid condensed into a human shape, which was gradually becoming more delicate. Hai Mei waved her hand in disgust, as if she couldn't stand the smell. "It's true of you. What's wrong with strengthening it at the beginning? You just strengthened the physique of a robot like a Terminator. It makes me smell a disgusting smell of engine oil every time I see you." The image of the other party was completely highlighted. She was a woman with a curvy figure. She was wearing a silver dress, which was a color that would have turned into liquid metal like mercury before. "As long as you're not gay," the woman stretched out her hand to straighten her hair. "Some people are born with this kind of affinity. In front of Jamie May, you will naturally relax, especially when women are facing each other. He often treats her as his sister. I'll be a little sleepy if you don't come, and I want to finish my manicure and take a bath." Hai Mei stretched out, looking very lazy. "You really have some time to spare." The woman rolled her eyes at Hai Mei. "Has there been any news from eldest sister recently?" "You think the two parties communicate by phone?" Hai Mei said a little speechlessly. "I will inform you every time there is any information from the elder sister." "The one that eldest sister likes the most is you," the woman suddenly said. "Zhao Qian, what do you mean by this?" Hai Mei heard another meaning in the woman's words. "Hai Mei, let's be honest. It's not long before I find an opportunity to be promoted to a senior audience. If my eldest sister gives you something or tells you something, you can't eat it alone. It's not like you don't know that if eldest sister directly helps us, it's like harming us. Is the eldest sister the one who cares about that kind of thing?" Zhao Qian stood up. "Okay, this is not only my opinion, but also the opinions of other people. Hai Mei, you are the only contact person here for the eldest sister. I hope you can share the resources you get from eldest sister." Hai Mei laughed after hearing this. "What you said is really interesting. Aren't you guys fighting against each other?" "Yes, that's how we are." Zhao Qian looked at Hai Mei naturally. "No relationship can last forever, even if we grew up together in an orphanage. The eldest sister used to be very take care of us, but each of us has our own way. If the eldest sister still needs us to help her in the real world, we have to give her a reward." "Are you so sure that eldest sister has given me Xiaozao?" Hai Mei yawned and spread her arms. "If I had been given Xiaozao, would I still be at the level of an ordinary veteran? Even you surpass me. Who knows what you are planning?" Zhao Qian obviously did not accept this trick. "If the eldest sister contacts you next time, you can suggest the eldest sister to change the contact person from you to Chen Guang." "Why, am I so distrusted by you?" Hai Mei finally understood that these guys wanted Zhao Qian to be the microphone this time. "After all, Chen Guang is the only senior audience member in our orphanage. We trust him, but you, I'm sorry, I really don't trust you very much." Zhao Qian spoke very directly. "I don't know if eldest sister cares about us orphans. Many of the people who came out of the hospital have died, and there are really not many people left, so we want to join together. If the eldest sister still wants us to listen to her and help her, then let's negotiate the price first. Well, after all, feelings cannot be eaten as food. In the real world, you can get some rewards by running errands for a high-level audience, so why should we keep doing useless work for her? Zhao Qianqian, do you really want to show no affection at all? Hai Mei picked up the coffee in front of her, drank it in one gulp, and then put the teacup on the coffee table, her voice a little heavy. If the eldest sister is still here, I don't believe you dare to come up to me and say such things. Haha, the problem is that she is not here now, and God knows if she can come back. Zhao Qianqian waved her hand. I'm leaving, don't forget what I said, we have already discussed it together. Next time, you can inform us again. No matter what we do, we won't recognize it unless Chen Guan comes forward. Also, Jaime, all you are good at is dressing up, playing the piano, and manicuring your nails. You are really not qualified to be a spokesperson or the leader of a group. As soon as she finished speaking, Zhao Qianqian's body turned into a pool of liquid metal again, seeping downwards, and her entire body disappeared. After it was confirmed that Zhao Qianqian had left, the anger on Hai Mei's face quickly disappeared. He turned around and faced the floor-to-ceiling window. Sister, the friends who used to follow you and call you eldest sister and let you work outside to earn money to support have all become like this. Hai Mei breathed out. Hua, it's true that there are no flowers. The darkness became thicker in an instant, which meant that someone suddenly believed in the scam in an instant, and for a moment re-injected a kind of power into the complex environment here. Xie Zhen originally thought that Subai was undergoing deep self-hypnosis again, but when he looked back, he saw a girl standing behind Subai, with a smile as bright as a flower. The girl looks exactly like the girl in the photo. Isn't this a scam? The darkness is a little thicker again. A cloud of smoke blew from behind Subai, blowing across Subai's neck. The hand was still on his shoulder, which seemed very intimate and natural, as if the two of them had been familiar with each other for a long time and had a lot of connection. Great understanding. Hey, Dabai, have you really forgotten me? The girl's voice is very clear, like the cry of a lark. Especially in this empty environment, the voice will appear even more ethereal, just like in a recording studio. The sound is the same. Subai turned around and looked at the girl wearing denim suspenders in front of her. The girl was pretty and had just the right amount of cute baby fat on her face. However, her figure was a bit blurry. She was obviously not a physical body, but she didn't seem to be a soul body either. It is more like a kind of projection, produced by the effect of light and shadow. Okay, you can introduce yourself. Subai silently took another puff of cigarette. I knew you would forget me, the girl said helplessly, because I touched a secret. The broadcast must erase your memories of me after my death, including you listeners. Bye Max, you and Sun, are you together? The girl suddenly asked. Her thinking felt a bit divergent, but precisely because of this way of speaking, it made people feel more credible. Xie Zhen walked step by step, and he naturally heard the conversation between Subai and the girl, but at this moment he immediately sat cross-legged and closed everything in himself. The darkness dissipated by a small amount. This is a way of blaming the blame, which means that regardless of whether it is true or false, I have closed myself off, so I will no longer be distressed. This weird environment will not be able to continue to draw strength from myself. As for whether you believe it or not, you, Subai, are alone. Just decide. For advanced listeners, this place is dangerous and weird, but it is definitely not a threat to their life or death, so Xie Zhen simply takes the identity of the melon eaters to the end. No, Subai replied concisely. His expression was also very calm, and there was no emotion in his eyes. However, the darkness around him did not completely dissipate because of Ji Zhen's withdrawal, which meant that Subai was still in the stage of disbelief. She has always been interested in you. The girl came to Subai's side and said sadly, to be honest, I was a little jealous at first. I was afraid that after I died, you would completely break up with her. We are together, because I know that the broadcast will probably modify your memory. In order to erase me, another person will fill in. I am afraid that you will really be together with Sooner in the end. Although they are all friends, I still get jealous. I cooked for you when you were injured, I took care of your little one when you were away, I felt sad when you were sick, and even this tombstone was what I said I wanted to buy. Are all these scenes going to Sooner? Even Sooner himself thinks so. The surrounding darkness was getting thicker and thicker. As the girl continued to speak, the surrounding atmosphere was gradually turning into a dark abyss. It seems that with just a little more improvement, the surrounding darkness will turn into a rushing black torrent, drowning everything. Sudbai still stood still, but the girl seemed to be encouraged at this moment. She took a step forward and pressed her forehead against Sudbai's chest. Don't blame me for being jealous, the audience is inherently selfish, isn't it? My first time is given to you. Even if I die, I will not allow you to find other women, including Sooner. When the girl finished saying this, a breeze suddenly blew. In an instant, the clouds were light and the wind was gentle, and the surrounding darkness faded completely. Soon, the girl's own body, including her own, began to become increasingly blurry. The girl looked shocked. She didn't know why this was happening. She had just added a handful of firewood and was able to make Sudbai completely believe in her and succeed. What was going on? Sudbai threw the cigarette butt on the ground, stepped on it, and then smiled. What I said before was quite touching, but you said that I had sex with you. Sudbai paused. Well, a doctor once told me that I have a disease in that area. Terror broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 722. The girl's figure completely dissipated, and the surrounding darkness basically faded away, but on a tombstone not far away, there was a light blue light flashing, like a will-o'-the-wisp floating there. Ji Zhen opened his eyes at this time. He had closed off all perception before, so he didn't hear Sudbai's last words. If he had heard it, he would have started teasing him long ago. That tombstone doesn't seem to be yours. Xie Zhen stood up and walked directly towards the glowing tombstone. Sudbai also walked over together. His previous experience made Sudbai understand Sooner and Chu Zhao a little bit. The feeling just now that can almost completely resonate with your heart will make people fall into it involuntarily, and then it will be quite. You pinched himself until he fainted. Xie Zhen walked to the tombstone. It was an empty tombstone with no face or name on it. This is the second time I've opened a grave today, Xie Zhen said as he reached out and grabbed the top of the tombstone. He exerted force with his palms and the tombstone shattered. Then, a blue firefly appeared among the tombstones. A firefly is only as big as a fingernail, but the light it emits is indeed a bit too dazzling. Huh! Ji Zhen pursed his lips and stretched out his hands, trying to catch the firefly, but in an instant, thunder broke out in the clear sky, and with a boom, a bolt of thunder fell, just falling on this original the location of the tombstone. Sudbai retreated subconsciously. The thunder came very suddenly, but it must have something to do with this weird firefly. Ji Zhen gritted his teeth and seemed to feel very sorry, but at this moment he had to give up and began to retreat. Although advanced listeners are powerful, they are not yet overly confident and think they can resist the laws of this world. After the thunder fell, a small pit of half a square meter was created at the location of the tombstone. The pit was indeed very small. Sudbai could even make a bigger pit with just a punch on the ground, but if someone had a brain injury, if you want to resist forcefully, then I'm sorry, the second and third thunderbolts will fall down soon. By then, one thunderbolt may be as thick as a telephone pole. Fatty once told Sudbai that the art of attracting thunder is actually equivalent to making a small report to the laws of heaven and earth. Generally speaking, the art of attracting thunder has the best effect on dealing with the existence of yin evil. On the one hand, it is because the power of thunder itself is capable of breaking evil spirits. On the other hand, the effect of evil spirits to exorcise evil spirits is that as long as it is a normal world, whether it is the real world or the story world, it has a self-regulating mechanism just like the human body. You can send a small report to the sky and tell the laws of this world that there are bad things here. Then the thunder will naturally fall and annihilate it. Therefore, the art of attracting lightning is a kind of borrowing from the rules of the world. The user spends more time on how to tell the sky. As for the thunder that finally falls, it has nothing to do with the caster. Oh, I was just wondering how this kind of thing could exist, and sure enough, it was struck by lightning as soon as it appeared. Xie Zhen put his hands on his hips, feeling helpless. What kind of insect is this? Subai asked. In Sudbai's view, this insect should be the key to all previous visions, and its ability even affects advanced listeners. The Queen Mother of the West's lovesick bug. Xie Zhen was obviously in a bad mood. I once entered a Zhou dynasty mausoleum in a story world and saw this bug in the mural. The owner of the tomb was a fortune teller in the Zhou dynasty, but at the same time, he also raised various spiritual insects part-time. There were so many bottles and jars of insects in his tomb that I almost died in it. But the insect that could be depicted on the mural by the owner of the tomb was obviously a high-level insect that even he could not raise himself, so he carved it on the mural with regret as an unfulfilled wish. The lovesick bug of the Queen Mother of the West. Subai really didn't understand this very well. Subai did know a little bit about the image of the Queen Mother of the West. The most well-known one to the public is the Queen Mother of the Peach Garden in Journey to the West, but in fact she has another one. Image, it is said that the unkempt face and body have the face and tail of a beast, which can be regarded as a kind of monster. Does Emperor Mu know? The fifth-generation emperor of the Zhou dynasty once traveled west to find the Queen Mother of the West. After meeting, the two of them visited Yaokai together, but after only a short time, the emperor said that he was leaving. Go and improve the lives of the people and make the world stable, and then tell Queen Mother 11 that you will give yourself 3 years to take care of your own world before coming back to her. But in fact, this emperor is similar to Zhu Haozhou in the Ming dynasty. He loves to play and fight, and he is also a man of unstable temper. The reason why it is said that the 3-year agreement is for the people of the world to say goodbye temporarily, it is a bit like a successful appointment and a canon. An irresponsible excuse. It is said that the Queen Mother of the West waited and waited in the Kunlun Mountains and used her own tears of lovesickness to cultivate eggs and raise this kind of lovesickness bug. The Queen Mother of the West also has a unique personality. She can raise bugs when she is in a good mood, and she can also raise bugs when she is in a bad mood. But obviously, although I don't know why this bug appears here, in the real world, it is not allowed to appear. So once you see the light, you must die. Xie Zhen glanced at Subai in surprise. By the way, I forgot to ask you about what happened in Guangzhou before. You also encountered such a thing that would die in the light, right? Obviously Xie Zhen came through himself. The channel knows some news. Absolutely. Subai thought of the piece of gold. The same thing happened to the piece of gold. He could only hide in an unobtrusive corner to entertain himself. Once it appeared in the eyes of the world, it also meant that it would immediately will be strangled. What a pity. After thinking about this, Subai said with some regret, I think instead of regretting that insect now, you might as well regret that you just crushed the tombstone simply and roughly. There must be something mysterious in this tombstone, otherwise it's impossible to preserve this bug and be able to make this bug work. Xie Zhen nodded after hearing this. Indeed, this insect was of no use to him because he could not own it. However, that tombstone had an extremely terrifying ability. It could not only seal the insect and isolate the world. The induction of the law also does not affect the insect's ability to exert its abilities. Let me pick up the broken tombstone and show it to my boss. Xie Zhen immediately took off his suit and wrapped the tombstone in his suit. You said that woman first placed a photo of Suner in a tombstone, and then deliberately changed the photo. Now this lovesick bug appears here again. What on earth is she going to do? Although Subai often couldn't quite understand the behavior of the man and the woman, this time, it was clearly a bit baffling. Is this a kind of experiment? Maybe it's conveying some message to you, Xie Zhen guessed, but I'm not sure. You, the son, don't know it, and it's impossible for me, an outsider, to guess it. Nothing happened here anymore. The bug was killed by lightning and the cause was found. Although the purpose of the woman is still unclear, at least there is no point in staying in the cemetery. The two quickly walked to the door. The rickety man was leaning against the door in a daze. 8 of the fingers on his hands were broken and they were really bloody. Xie Zhen walked over and kicked the opponent. It's not like it can't grow back after the next story world. Come to my place tonight and I'll see what I can give you. Thank you, sir. The other party immediately stood up and respectfully opened the door for him. Are you going to take my car back or take a taxi? Xie Zhen asked Subai. I'll go back by myself. Okay, if there is any news about the tombstone fragments, I will let you know. Xie Zhen placed the fragments wrapped in a suit directly on the passenger seat, and then drove away. The rickety man bent down to say goodbye to Subai and left quickly. It was not very convenient to take a taxi nearby, so Subai walked along a small road outside the cemetery alone. When he got to the fork there was more traffic. There have been a lot of things going on recently. In addition to being promoted to a senior audience, there are also the so-called hell in the memory of the female corpse and what the purpose of my cheap mother suddenly did this. Subai actually didn't want to think about the good things about her. For example, she wanted to send some message to herself, because this woman took away her son, and at the same time, she could also use her son as a test subject to do whatever she wanted. That orphanage became the cradle of listeners. Many orphans with poor life experience had to become listeners and died in fear. At the same time, even the body of his own sister was left to rot after use. A person can be vicious, but he can be so vicious that even the most ruthless audience will be stunned. But as he walked and thought about it, Subai suddenly stopped again. He suddenly felt that something was wrong. He seemed to have fallen into a preconceived concept from the beginning. In other words, when he saw that when I took the photo, I thought of my cheap mother, but if it was really her, why did she put that photo under the tombstone? Didn't that make it clear that she did it? Even when she came to her home to take the little guy away, she didn't leave a word. It seemed that she didn't bother to explain, and she didn't bother to explain, but this time, it seemed that she was really too deliberate. From the group photos to Sunar's photos, everything feels artificially manipulated. As the saying goes, a child is like a mother. In fact, this sentence can also be said in reverse. Subai's understanding of that woman is that she is a woman who is aloof and almost perverted. Except for herself, everything else is nothing to her. Floating clouds. Now I feel like I'm throwing shit at that woman's head. If she didn't do it, who did it? Subai filtered the whole thing from beginning to end in his mind. Suddenly, Subai realized that this time, he was really in the dark. Subai took out a cigarette and put it directly into his mouth without lighting it, chewing it slowly. Taking out his cell phone, Subai dialed the number for Qizhen, and the call was quickly connected. Hey, Subai, can't you get a taxi? I'll come back to pick you up now. Is it fun? Subai asked. The other party was silent. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 724. The car drove into the villa area. Owning a spacious villa in Shanghai, a place where land is extremely valuable, is now something that is out of reach for most ordinary people. Xie Zhen got out of the car and saw Yang Sen sitting by the swimming pool reading the newspaper in front of him. The relationship between them was always so simple and quiet. Because Liang Sen is as low-key as ever, and can even be said to be cowardly, There are really not many people who know Liang Senator compared with Lizzie's feat of erasing a city. Liang Sen really has no sense of existence. But he knew clearly that Liang Sen was definitely not as simple as he seemed. He was timid and cowardly. He would even squat at the foot of the table and burst into tears when facing the broadcast. How could it really be that simple for him who has been able to survive until now and has now become a master of enlightenment? Especially with the cooperation of Xie Zhen and Fatty, Liang Sen's strength was exposed and he was forced by the broadcast to preach. Now, he is actually just waiting for the ticket on the next train. Fear. Fear. Timid. Cowardice. It seemed meaningless at this time. For Liang Sen, he had no choice or room for change. Back Liang Sen put away the newspaper, looked at Xie Zhen, and then looked at the thing wrapped in a suit in Xie Zhen's hand. It seems the result is not very good. Liang Sen rubbed his chin with one hand and picked up the ice water in front of him with the other hand and took a sip. The effect is very good, but the result is not very good. For people with a really tough mind, it is basically difficult to have an absolute effect. Even if you understand his hidden things in advance, even if you are targeted, it will still be of no avail. At least, for advanced listeners, it's not much of a challenge. Xie Zhen said it very directly. Are you angry? Liang Sen caught Zhen Zhen's emotions. He knows, Xie Zhen replied. Oh, Liang Sen nodded. I thought it would take him a while to find out. This makes me very embarrassed. Xie Zhen stepped forward, picked up the kettle on the table, poured a glass of water, then took out a few ice cubes from the ice cube box and put them in, and then drank it all in one gulp. Xie Zhen felt, you need to calm down your anger. Are you pitying him? Liang Sen seemed to be very interested in Xie Zhen's emotional tendencies, a bit like he was examining his daughter-in-law who might have cheated on her. No, Xie Zhen looked at Liang Sen, but he should be very angry, because we also treat him as a test subject. He's just angry when he's angry. Liang Senhun doesn't care about this kind of thing. The things he cares about are really getting less and less. In the past, his cowardice and humbleness were more because there was still a way out, but now, he has with no way out, he became fearless. Occasionally looking at the starry sky with an astronomical telescope at night would always give him a feeling he had never had before. He was born as a test subject for those two people. Isn't it his fate to be used as a test subject by us now? After saying that, Liang Sen smiled. He's angry, so what can he do? Yes, he is angry, so what? You explain that you listened to me and tricked him, but you are also a senior listener and have been promoted longer than him. Are you still afraid of him? Taking another 10,000 steps back, I haven't left by train yet. I have always thought he is a very interesting person, Xie Zhen explained. Maintaining a good relationship with him may be of great use at some point. Are you attracted by his charisma? Liang Sen's smile turned gloomier, the charisma of a mental patient. Boss, Xie Zhen sighed, you were not like this before. Snapped. As soon as a slap appeared on the left side of Zhen Zhen's cheek, Ji Zhen did not move. Liang Sen didn't move either. But in fact, it was obvious that Xie Zhen received a slap from Liang Sen. You don't need to judge my affairs. You are just my assistant, my secretary, and my friend. At the same time, you are also a betrayer. If you hadn't unblocked my clone, I wouldn't have done it. Come this far. Xie Zhen took out a piece of silk cloth and gently wiped the blood stains at the corner of his mouth. The slap hurt, but he still behaved naturally. Liang Sen looked at Xie Zhen, his stern eyes slowly softened. You said that I was cowardly and didn't dare to be promoted, so I blocked your progress. Therefore, you unlocked the seal of my clone and forced me to prove the truth. I actually don't blame you. People will be destroyed if they don't do it for themselves, let alone the audience. Xie Zhen once said that because of his love for Liang Sen, he didn't want to see Liang Sen living in such a humble way. But this reason can only be one of them, and it is a more pleasant one. Liang Sen can believe it or not. His parents managed to avoid the broadcaster's gaze. I'm really curious about how they did it. Liang Sen still revealed his true purpose. So, have you discovered it? Xie Zhen asked. Liang Sen shook his head. Do you know why that man and woman became the so-called nominal couple? Ji Zhen remained silent, waiting for Liang Sen to continue. In the entire real world, the eyes of broadcasting are actually everywhere. They are everywhere and omnipotent, but broadcasting actually has its own dogmatic limitations. For example, if the area that exists does not belong to the real world, nor does it belong to the story world, nor is it a space rift, or even strictly speaking, there is no such place at all. So, how can the radio locate them? Naturally, there is no way to find them, and there is nothing that can be done about them. Where is that place? Xie Zhen asked. He was keenly aware that Liang Sen seemed to have known something for a long time, but he had been patiently waiting until he was helplessly forced to testify before he started to really investigate. Liang Sen stretched out his hand and nodded his head, saying with some regret, "Unfortunately, you are not from the same era as Li Ji, but I am." Xie Zhen didn't know what this meant, and he didn't know how to respond, because his boss relied on his ability to shrink from one generation of listeners to the next, but he didn't seem to be suitable to praise him. Lizzie's fate is actually similar to that of Subai. Liang Sen slowly sat back on the chair. At first, she was very grateful to the uncles and aunts who adopted her since she was a child, and even regarded them as, after all, in Lizzie's view, her biological parents abandoned her, but the dean and his wife adopted her, and they have always cared for her and treated her as their own. In the past, when Lizzie and I were both low-level listeners, she once invited me to visit Chengdu. There were a few other friends at that time, but they are all gone now, the rest are dead, and Lizzie had already left here by train. I'm almost there too. At that time, I remembered that Li Ji, who was usually very reserved and didn't say many jokes, suddenly revealed her life experience. She grew up in an orphanage and had a very deep feeling for the dean and his wife. I remember asking at that time where the dean and his wife were now. She replied that she had died in a car accident. We also accompanied her to visit her grave together. That was the most talkative time she had ever had since I met Lichi, and the most profound expression of her emotions. What happens next? Xie Zhen asked. You should know that this matter has been spread among the senior audience circles a few days ago. There is an orphanage in Chengdu, and there are many listeners. I guess there are quite a few senior listeners. There is even a senior listener. I've heard about this. Boss, you mean, which orphanage did Lichi come from? An orphanage that has no audience. Liang Sen nodded. Probably after she became a senior, she was a little earlier than me. We met by chance that time. I went to Chengdu to look for an ancient tomb of Zishu, and met Li Ji, who had been living in Chengdu. That day happened to be Qingming festival, and I wanted to accompany her to visit her grave. Hearing this, Xie Zhen knew in his mind that the so-called Qingming festival was definitely not as simple as a coincidence. He probably calculated the days and wanted to show his courtesy. But Lizzie simply said one sentence. She said that if she had a chance, she would find those two people and torture them with all the ways in the world. Naturally, I didn't go to visit the tomb that time. Later, I inquired for a long time and roughly learned some things. There must be something wrong with that orphanage, and the so-called director and his wife had even bigger problems. Lichi was cultivated by an audience couple, and the cultivation process was very inhumane, even, it can be said that it was unscrupulous, but before you knew the truth, you would still think about their good deeds. I was thinking about this issue at that time. The couple in the audience spent so much time cultivating Lizzie. First they treated her as well as parents, and then they seemed to deliberately expose what they had done to her. What is the purpose? Did you get the inspiration when I told you about Subai's life experience before? Xie Zhen asked. Yes, when you told me about the life experience of the neighbor detective, I noticed something special. Then I went to investigate on my own and found out that he was actually the son of that couple, and he also became an audience member. It's exactly the same routine, tearing off the disguise from the foundation of warm parental love, revealing the bloody truth. By coincidence, I had a few sealed love worms in my hand, and then I came up with a guess like this. Over the years, many gifted and talented listeners still cannot escape the gaze of radio, but that couple can. Why? The love worm is an abstract expression, but it seems to give an idea to answer the question. They turned to Lychee first, and then to Subai. Let them go from love to deep hatred. Especially after Lizzie left by train, they emphatically repeated the story that happened to Lizzie to Subai. For love bugs, the stronger the love and the stronger the hatred, the more intense the love and the stronger the hatred, the more intense the love and the stronger the hatred, the more intense the love and the stronger the hatred, the more intense the love and the stronger the hatred, the more intense the love and the stronger the hatred. Speaking of this, Liang Sen stopped. Xie Zhen had a look of disbelief on his face and said, "Boss, you mean, that couple? Are they living in the knowledge of Lychee and Subai?" Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 725. Instead of taking a taxi back, Subai chose to walk. Although it was quite far from Lao Fang's house, it seemed to make no difference to Subai now whether he could go home or not. Every time he came back from the outside or from the story world, Subai always subconsciously wanted to go home, and also looked forward to opening the entrance door and seeing the little guy staggering on his little feet and throwing himself into his arms. For a long time, the little guy has been the last soft place in Subai's heart, but now that place has been shoveled away. Because of his perverted willpower, Subai did not go crazy and hysterical, but it made him he became a little numb. Being numb to others is also numb to yourself. But fortunately, Subai knew one thing, and that was the current goal, which was to become stronger, stronger, and stronger again. As for the rest, it didn't matter. Just like this incident in the cemetery park, in fact, if it wasn't related to his own fixed thinking, his first reaction would definitely be to suspect that Xie Zhen, who was present at the time, had something to do with this incident. However, Subai himself felt a little strange the most. What's strange is that when I discovered the crux of the problem and proved that my guess was correct, I didn't have the same urge for revenge that arose in my heart as before. Even Xie Zhen is an advanced listener. But he deceived himself and hurt Suner and Chu Zhao. In the past, I must have come to seek revenge at this time, but now, I am still taking a walk. Damn, I actually still have time to take a walk. Yes, Xie Zhen was promoted to a high-level audience earlier than him. Even in a one-on-one situation, Subai didn't have much confidence that he could defeat Xie Zhen. What's more, behind Xie Zhen, there is another person who almost lives and eats with him. Boss. But the key to Subai's thinking is not here, but rather. It seems that after experiencing some things, I have undergone a change that is somewhat unfamiliar to me. In the past, when I encountered this kind of thing, I should have ignored each other and hurt each other. It didn't matter whether you were a high-level audience, whether there was a mistress behind you, who you loved. But this time, I had been looking for it for a long time and had been brewing for a long time. It seemed that I no longer had the urge, nor did I have the fierceness to lift the table. Yes. It's numb. Too numb to look like. As he walked, Subai's mood became more and more depressed. People living in this world will always change due to changes in the surrounding environment. If you want to survive better, you have to learn to adapt to local conditions. In the past, Subai was too lazy to learn and always lived by himself. Now I don't know when I learned it. And Subai hated himself very much, at least, he hated himself at this moment. Subai really hated himself in the short period of time from the time he dialed Xie's phone number to the present, because he believed that he shouldn't be like this, and he shouldn't be like this. Maybe it's because there are too many sufferings in life. Sudbai walked to a bridge. Under the bridge was an artificial river. In today's era, when the tombs are being speculated for every inch of land, the requirements for the tombs are naturally getting higher and higher. The cemetery area here is from a certain angle. From a practical point of view, it can be regarded as an artificial transformation into a situation close to mountains and rivers. The bridge deck is not very high from the river is very clear, and there are Magnolia grandiflora blooming on the bank. Even from a distance, you can still smell a touch of fragrance. His own figure was reflected in the river, a little blurry, and also appeared a little distorted as the water rippled. Sudbai put his hands on the railing and looked at himself on the river. At this time, when he looked at himself, he really looked like himself on the river. Strangeness. Ugly. Slowly, I sat down against the railing, and the smell of moisture in the air became stronger and stronger. It was summer, and it would naturally rain more and more frequently. A hand was woven through his hair, and his purple hair looked a little lonely at this time, similar to the sad magazine pictures that were popular 7 or 8 years ago. For the first time, he felt strange to himself. Sudbai really didn't like this feeling, and he knew that he was completely carefree now, but he was becoming less and less like before. On. The monk, the fat man, the Buddha, and many people who knew him in the past all said that he was mentally ill, including the reason why he established a killing club in the past. He could not control his impulse to kill. But now, have I recovered from my illness? Taking a deep breath, he exhaled it heavily. He raised his head and saw that the sky was completely dark. The depressing atmosphere can often inspire something hidden in people's hearts, but Sudbai didn't even think of standing up now. He was like a child huddled under the corner, helpless but helpless. Sudbai thought about a lot of things, including his own birth, his youth, and his experience after becoming an audience. People will always change without knowing it. Some things he likes to hear and see, while others are, even I feel uncomfortable or even unable to stand it. Tick-tock, tick-tock. Rain fell from the sky sparsely, not heavily, just drizzle. The cell phone rang at this moment. Sudbai took it out and looked at it. It was Chu Zhao. Hello, Sudbai answered the phone. Hey, Dabai, is that really a scam? Chu Zhao's side was probably open to the public, and Suner was probably listening. Scam. The so-called other girl was a scam, and what Xie Zhen did was also a scam. Yes, Sudbai responded. Do you know who set up the trap? Chu Zhao continued hesitantly. Is someone targeting me and Suner? Dabai, it's not convenient for you to help us. If you can, Suner and I want to be ourselves, go figure it out. Obviously, after becoming low-level listeners, both Suner and Chu Zhao have learned more about the taboos of listeners and the rules of broadcasting. Chu Zhao is no longer the decadent person who drunkenly came to his door to ask for explanations. The police. Sudbai didn't know how to answer, because the matter was very clear. This scam, Suner and Chu Zhao, was just a hook, or a reason, or even an initial experiment. The real goal of the other party was actually he, Sudbai himself. Moreover, Suner and Chu Zhao were completely different from each other, not even including the boss. I know, Sudbai replied. Can you tell us? Chu Zhao's tone when talking to Sudbai now became more and more cautious. You can't solve it? There was silence on the other end of the phone. Obviously, neither Suner nor Chu Zhao knew how to answer this question, but Suner was smarter and said directly to the side, Dabai, is this person targeting you? Indeed, such an exquisite design was only used to deal with her and Chu Zhao, which felt like a cannon hitting mosquitoes. As Sudbai was among the parties involved in this matter, many things were actually easy to analyze. Yes, Sudbai admitted. Then where are you now? Suner asked worriedly. I'm sitting on the bridge. Sudbai looked around and replied. There was a sound of surprise on the other end of the phone. It seemed that both of them were very surprised by Sudbai's current behavior. Sudbai naturally heard the surprise in it. He leaned his head back, and the back of his head rested on the cement block of the bridge, which felt cold to the touch. Then you, don't be impulsive, Suna reminded. Yes, Sudbai licked his lips. I'm dead. Chu Zhao and I can be discharged from the hospital and go home to recuperate tomorrow. You don't have to pick us up. We can take care of ourselves. Good. Suna hung up the phone. Sudbai was holding the phone in his hand, and his face was slightly moist. Of course it couldn't be tears, but rain. Soon, the vibrating sound of the phone broke the silence again. This time, it was the monk's call. It seems that I haven't contacted the monk for a long time. When I came back this time, the monk went to Nantung. Monk Sudbai answered the phone. Dabai, the poor monk is back, where are you? Here in Zishan Cemetery, Sudbai replied. Go there to see the scenery, the monk asked. No, I just got fooled, and now I'm thinking about it, Sudbai chuckled. You were deceived, are you still reflecting? The monk was greatly surprised. Gyatso should also be next to the monk. Both of them should be in the living room now, because Sudbai heard the sound of the TV in the living room from the other end of the phone. Yeah, I'm thinking about it. You can actually reflect on it. The monk seemed to hear the slight disappointment in Sudbai's tone, but he still said, shouldn't we just go back and take revenge? Am I that irritable? Sudbai asked. Haha, the monk smiled and continued, are you the audience? Well, senior listener, there is a higher one behind you. Then forget it, the monk advised, it won't be too late to settle some accounts later. I'll cook tonight. You can come back after your walk. Okay, I also miss your vegetarian meal. Sudbai stood up, waited for the other end to hang up, and then put the phone into his pocket, but after thinking about it, Sudbai took it out again. The phone was turned over in the palm of his hand, and then, Sudbai continued to look at the river below. My reflection on the river became blurrier and uglier due to the rain. Suddenly, Sudbai thought of a person, a friend he had only met once, a child. Yes, how could I forget about him? Turn around and look around. You should be around here. Nonsense, of course I'm here. A boy's head popped up from under the river and looked at Sudbai, who was standing on the bridge. My dad works here. I usually stay here except at school. Someone is causing trouble here. How could I not know? Oh, Sudbai responded. The little boy tilted his head slightly and looked at Sudbai. Road. Why have you become a coward? Terror broadcast. Author, Chunji Disyao. Chapter 726. Why have you become a coward? The little boy's body slowly emerged. His feet were close to the water, steady and steady, reminiscent of the signature postures in some martial arts movies, but Sudbai could see clearly that this was the way he condensed the evil spirit of the zombies. Performance caused on the water. The last time I saw him, it was because of a family murder case. However, Sudbai did not want to settle accounts with him or seek justice for God. Moreover, the little boy just acted a little too radically and did not even violate the rules of broadcasting. He was just satisfying. He went on to express his pursuit of the art of death under the premise of rules, and he never denied this. His father works in the cemetery park, and he usually stays here with his father after school or holidays. Maybe, choosing zombie bloodline enhancement is also related to this. When people put things on your property, you don't say a word. People asked why he had become a coward, but Sudbai didn't answer because before, both Suna and the monk had the same idea, that is, after being tricked by others, Sudbai was watching the scenery on the bridge. This is not in line with Sudbai's style of painting, because he has never been one to break his teeth and swallow them in his stomach. He is a senior audience, so I can only hide. The little boy jumped up to the bridge and stood in front of Sudbai. He looked Sudbai up and down and said speechlessly, "You are also a senior audience. Why are you so cowardly? I saw the whole thing. Then your hidden skills are pretty good. Neither he nor I noticed you. Haha, the little boy laughed twice without any emotion, and then said with some disappointment, I have discussed art with you before, but now it seems that there is no need for us to discuss it in the future. A person who is interested in life, people who have lost their passion for life are not worthy of discussing art with me. In the death case of that family, each corpse was put in a special shape, but this is the art that the little boy firmly believes belongs to him and can understand his own people. In fact, many times, some radical choices cannot bring about the desired results, and even the desired vent cannot be achieved. Facing this zombie boy who suddenly appeared, Subai couldn't help but talk more than when talking to Monk and Suner Chuzhao, because after the last contact, Subai knew that this zombie boy had exactly the same obsession as himself. And similar extremes. In other words, it's the same as my old self. Subai didn't know why he could be so quiet this time. He also felt melancholy and even a little uneasy. He always felt that he had not changed, and that he had always insisted on himself. But when faced with the facts, he suddenly felt like he had to peel himself apart to see clearly. In fact, he had been changing since the little guy entered his life. On that rainy night after the little guy left, Subai felt that his heart was dead. When he killed the so-called grandfather, he finally stopped, so that his anger could not be vented, but instead distorted himself. After 3 months of self-mutilation training on a desert island, and then being promoted to a high-level listener, the improvement in life level is not very consistent with the current soul or so-called state of mind. The contrast brought by this is already changing the previous one. Subai slowly passed away. So, now, Xie Zhen had tricked him, but he just called and asked, and then sat on the bridge, soaked in the rain. Why bother? Zombie boy jumped up and sat on the bridge pier. If becoming a high-level audience means being tied up like you, then I would rather never be him in the future. Really, I have been watching from the side, and I heard clearly every word you said, because this is my home court. Even if you are an advanced audience, you didn't expect me to exist, so I heard it. Some secrets about you. You have a very bad relationship with your mother. You always thought that your mother did all this, so you put your hatred and attention on your mother. To be honest, I don't know how your mother treats you, but that's your mother, not his mother. No matter how unconscionable your mother is, and an outsider uses your family affairs to frame you, you can still sit on the bridge and watch the scenery so calmly. Subai shrugged, yeah. Seeing Subai's attitude, the little boy felt even more aggrieved. Could it be that I was wrong before? I thought I found someone with the same mindset. Subai smiled. Forget it, I won't say anything. I'm lonely. The little boy sighed and turned away directly. The small wind in the rain blew his collar. This little boy actually felt lonely. Subai also walked off the bridge and walked to the highway entrance. Along the way, he kept thinking about one question, that is, has he changed? And is this change good or bad? A taxi stopped at Subai's wave. Where are you going? The driver turned around and asked Subai. It's really hard for me to imagine that this is possible. Xie Zhen breathed a long sigh of relief. Indeed, this span of thinking was really unacceptable to him, even if he was an advanced listener. It was hard for me to imagine it at first. Liang Sen reached out and picked up the newspaper again, until I met something like a love worm. Unfortunately, the rules of the real world do not allow it to exist, at least not to appear. It's in the sun, so its abilities haven't been fully available to me. But at least I got a clue, or an inspiration, from the love bug, because the couple's behavior, what they did to the detective and to Li Ji were so incredible that you couldn't even help it. Find an alternative explanation that might work. Two people try their best to be good to a child and create a beautiful childhood for him and a warm image of parents. However, when the child grows up and starts to become stronger and stronger, they take the initiative to show their flaws and reveal bloody things. Disguise, actively revealing the truth that makes them want to drink his blood and eat his flesh. It is really only the ability and thinking similar to the love bug that can make all these illogical things logical. Xie Zhen fell into deep thought. He knew why Liang Sen wanted to do this experiment so actively, because his boss had not given up on avoiding the broadcaster's gaze, and he had not really accepted his fate and waited for the ticket to come and then leave by train. In fact, I want to imitate. By the way, you just said that the little detective knew the truth. What did he say? Liang Sen asked. I didn't say anything. Ji Zhen shook his head, that's why I felt strange. It didn't seem like him anymore. People will always change after experiencing too many blows, and they may become strangers to themselves. Liang Sen read the newspaper for a while, and Xie Zhen sat down next to him, smoking a cigarette from time to time. Obviously, this incident had a great impact on Xie Zhen, and for him, it was no less than opening up a new world. Both of them sat quietly from noon to evening. Liang Sen closed his eyes and meditated after reading the newspaper, while Xie Zhen kept thinking, only getting himself cigarettes and wine in the middle. I'm hungry, Liang Sen said, let's order takeout. Xie Zhen nodded and used his mobile phone to call a hotel to ask them to deliver takeout. After putting down the phone, Xie Zhen looked at his boss and hesitated to speak. Tell me, this is not your style. A smile appeared on Liang Sen's lips. He had probably guessed what Xie Zhen might say. Boss, if you want to imitate that couple's path, will I become another Subai? Yes, it seems that he is the only one who has the qualifications and conditions to become another Subai to achieve your goal of escaping from the broadcaster's gaze. Ha ha ha. Liang Sen laughed a little exaggeratedly, as if tears were about to flow out. What are you thinking about? Liang Sen spread his hands. This is a huge project. That couple has been busy and planning for this matter for so long. In order to find lychees, they did not hesitate to open fire. He opened an orphanage, and at the same time, most of the children in the orphanage became listeners in the future. In order to find Lychee's successor, they gave birth to more than one child, treating their son as the next carrier after Lychee. Where do I have time to do this? Should I find a surrogate mother now? And you are so old. If you already know the truth about this kind of thing, you can't be my carrier. Xie Zhenwen said, indeed, this is indeed the truth. Did he? A text message came on my phone. Ji Zhen picked it up and looked at it. His expression suddenly changed. It was a text message about a person's whereabouts. What's wrong? Liang Sen asked. Subai. Haha, what happened to our little detective? He flew to Jiamuzi, and because he changed his identity, my message was delayed. It is estimated that he landed in Jiamuzi more than an hour ago. Liang Sen's face darkened. I remember you have an adoptive mother who still lives in Jiamuzi. Yes, Xie Zhen called Subai anxiously. He doesn't dare to hurt your adoptive mother, otherwise. But he is a psychopath. He has not changed. He has not changed at all. From the time he called me, he had actually ordered the vote count. He also investigated me. He had already thought of how to retaliate against me. He would not. Those who care about the punishment of broadcasting will not do it. Liang Sen didn't know what to say after being yelled at by Ji Xie. The phone call was connected at this time. Hey, Subai, don't get excited. Tell me where you are now. Xie Zhen tried his best to soften his tone. We two have something to discuss. Really, I did not do it right before. My apologies. I was having dinner at Auntie G's house. Auntie specially bought food for me to cook. I said I was your friend and I came to Jiamuzi on a business trip to help you visit her. Come on, come to Jiamuzi too, don't follow your boss. Auntie is very nice and enthusiastic. Come over here and come alone. I won't do anything to you. Subai, she is my mother, don't you think it's despicable for you to do this? At this time, Xiazhen didn't expect that when he designed Subai before, he used the secrets he knew between himself and Subai's parents, and also it can be regarded as taking advantage of other people's family affairs to attack others. You can also find my mother, I won't stop you. Xie said. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 727. The original name of Jiamuzi is Jiamuzi Gashan and Jiamuzi Tun, which are Manchu and are translated as Zhang'an Tun or Yuchan village, referred to as Jiamuzi. It is located in the northeast of Heilongjiang Province and is the provincial territory of Heilongjiang Province. Sub-central city. Aunt Xia is a bit bloated and is a relatively fat aunt. She is cooking for Subai in the kitchen. When she learned that Subai was a good friend of her adopted son Xiazhen, Aunt Xia seemed very enthusiastic. Subai was sitting on a chair in the living room, lighting a cigarette in his hand, and there were fruits on the coffee table. When it was almost 8 o'clock, Aunt Ji called Subai to come for dinner. There were only 2 people at the dinner table, Aunt Ji and Subai, but there were 8 dishes on the table. Xiazhen doesn't come back very often. Maybe it's because his mentality has changed a lot after becoming a listener, and he is naturally a little indifferent to family ties. However, the money that Ji Zhen pays back every month is not a lot. It can be seen that from I still respect this adoptive mother very much in my heart. After finishing the meal, Aunt Xia left Subai to live at home so that she could avoid staying in a hotel. Subai excused herself and left Xiazhen's house because she had other things to do. However, Subai did not go far. There were many empty houses or apartments in this apartment building. It was a temporarily uninhabited room that had been renovated, so Subai simply moved into the empty room above her aunt. There were no other problems with the house except that it had not been occupied for a long time, so it was a bit dusty. In the evening, Subai received a call from the monk. The monk asked Subai why he hadn't come back yet. Subai said that he was in Jiamuzi. Hearing this, the monk was silent for a while and reminded Subai that he and Buddha might be promoted in the near future. He hoped that if Subai has the chance, he can come back to help them protect the law. Subai agreed and said he would go back when the matter here is settled. Afterwards, Subai simply took a shower and lay down on the bed to rest. This sleep was not very long, but at least he was asleep. Subai was not worried about Xiazhen's sudden appearance and sneak attack. He lived upstairs from Aunt Xia's house. With Xiazhen's caution, it was absolutely impossible. Suddenly so radical, and unless they use some special method, if they just take a plane, they won't be able to get here until tomorrow morning at the earliest. At around 6 o'clock in the morning, Subai woke up and had a good night's sleep. He opened the window and walked to the balcony. Below, there were old people in the community doing morning exercises in 2s and 3s. Everything seemed quiet and peaceful, until a person walked into the community covered in dust. Subai looked at him and shook the ashes from his cigarette. The other party was also looking at Subai, but the other party was obviously more worried about his adoptive mother who lived on the floor below Subai. The next moment, Subai's figure disappeared from the balcony and came to the flower bed on the ground, less than 10 meters away from Xiazhen. I apologize to you. Xiazhen looked at Subai and said. I don't accept it. Subai's answer was simple and straightforward. Is my mother okay? Xiazhen asked. He was already here. Subai had no reason to take action against his adoptive mother. Very good. The answer was still simple. Then, Subai rushed over. Xiazhen's eyes were focused, and he kicked his legs on the ground. His whole body turned into a wisp of breeze and dissipated. After dodging Subai's blow, he regrouped his body on the other side. I don't want to fight you because I feel sorry for you, Xiazhen said. I'm sorry. Subai pointed at his face. I remember you thought I was a mad dog, right? Xiazhen and Subai have known each other for a long time, but because Xiazhen's strength has always been higher than Subai's, his perception of Subai is naturally different from others, with a sense of looking down on him. Therefore, at that time, Subai in his eyes, many of his actions were like that of a mad dog that was lucky enough to survive. Nodding, Xiazhen chose to admit. But when I am now a high-level listener like you, you forget that I am a mad dog because you find that I have changed. When I am no longer crazy, you feel that you have a broken-backed boss covering you, and I can't do anything to you, so you have nothing to fear, right? Ji Zhen frowned slightly. He didn't know how to answer Subai's question because he didn't seem to find the answer himself. But it is very likely that Subai is right. You can't beat me after a long time, Xiazhen said these words. In his palm, a light blue flame was rising. He had been promoted to the senior audience longer than Subai, so he should occupy the position. More advantages. Subai smiled. He slowly lowered his head, and then slowly raised it again. At this time, his purple hair exuded a strange feeling. It was no longer the style of Shamate, but the embellishment of a devil. The whole person's temperament also suddenly changed. Dirty, disaster, curse, and all kinds of negative auras were constantly exuding from him. I never thought about whether I could beat this or not. As soon as he finished speaking, Subai rushed out again. Xiazhen's body dissipated again and appeared in another direction, but at the same time, 7 identical Xiazhen suddenly appeared in the surroundings. The 8 people made seals together. For a moment, the area here seemed to be shackled. Before becoming a high-level listener, Xiazhen's main strength was actually illusion. Therefore, it was impossible for him to allow Subai to get close to him. Although the two parties were not true friends, they had more contact and understood each other to a similar extent. Furthermore, both sides are now advanced listeners, and their control over power is quite different. Therefore, even if the battle is taking place in a community, they both have the ability to do a dojo in a conch shell. Whoever accidentally kills an ordinary person by mistake, that's who is unlucky. However, what surprised Xiazhen was that Subai, who thought he would work hard to break his shackles, suddenly had 7 clones appear, and then basically faced each one one-on-one, punching each one at the same time. Go out. In a short period of time, Xiazhen couldn't tell which one was the real Subai, and he also believed that Subai couldn't tell which one was the real him, but this also meant that his power could only choose one of them to suppress, and Subai can choose one of them to attack. If Subai made the wrong choice, he would just continue to be suppressed. But if he made the wrong choice, he would probably be beaten alive in front of his face. The bets between the two parties would be seriously unbalanced. Ji Zhen immediately dissipated all his clones and began to retreat. He had plenty of time and means. He thought he had the advantage, so he was not in a hurry. However, when Xiazhen just stepped back, he suddenly felt a chill coming from his back. It actually appeared behind him. Xiazhen opened one eye and closed the other. For a moment, another face appeared on the back of his head. It was also his face, but it appeared behind him. Similarly, one eye was opened and the other was closed, but the opened eye released a red light, which directly hit Subai. Subai, who had just detoured behind him, was hit in the chest before he could carry out a sneak attack. Pierced directly, the whole person retreated. However, just when Xiazhen was about to take advantage of the situation to pursue him, he found that the figure of Subai who had just been hit by him began to dissipate while flying upside down. It's also fake. Buzz. An emaciated fist with almost only skin and bones appeared in front of the understanding. Boom. The fist hit Xiazhen's shoulder, and Xiazhen's whole body was blown away like a cannonball. His body drew a gully tens of meters long on the concrete floor of the community. Sand and dust suddenly flew everywhere, and the old people doing morning exercises nearby could only I felt a continuous roar, and I was so frightened that I immediately started to run away. The scene was very chaotic. The skinny Sudbai walked forward slowly in the dust. When he got closer, he saw Siezhen, whose clothes were torn, slowly standing up. In the fight just now, Siezhen suffered a big loss. Who thought he had the advantage, was finally defeated by Sudbai's continuous calculations. Even contempt could not cover up this defeat, because Siezhen knew that his opponent was also a high-level audience, and he could despise him no matter how much he despised. Where to go? It's even, okay. Ji Zhen wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, looked at Sudbai, and said seriously, or, I can find something from other places to compensate you. From the beginning, Siesun's fighting spirit was not very strong. This was the first time Siesun was promoted to a senior audience and faced an opponent of the same level. Of course, it was also the first time for Sudbai. Is it even? Sudbai seemed to have heard a joke and continued to walk towards Ji Zhen. I can tell you a secret about where your parents are. This is why we set up a trap for you. Siezhen planned to use this to calm Sudbai's anger. Although it was only the first time that the two sides had fought, I don't know why, but Siezhen had a bad feeling at this time. It was obvious that he had been promoted to the senior audience longer than Sudbai, but judging from the feeling of the fight just now, Sudbai seemed to be better at using his current power than he was. Much more exquisite. In fact, both of them have just been promoted to high-level listeners, and they are both in the stage of exploring and familiarizing themselves with power. Logically speaking, Ji Zhen should be more advantageous than Sudbai, but perhaps one thing Sudbai himself did not expect is that in his own when he was promoted to a senior audience, the last 10% was made up with gold. That piece of gold was used to make up for the jade seal passed down from the country. Now it is on Sudbai. The most intuitive feeling it brings is Sudbai's perception of the surrounding space. The affinity is definitely not the level possessed by a newly promoted senior listener. Siezhen misjudged Sudbai's strength. Of course, Sudbai himself did not expect this. He was still wondering why he felt that Siezhen was so much weaker than he thought during the fight. About the location of my parents, Sudbai muttered to himself. Right. Are you my father? Sudbai looked at Siezhen and asked with a smile. Of course not, don't be joking. Then you must be my grandson, otherwise how could you be so interested in my family affairs, right? Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 728. People, sometimes you have to stick to something. Why do so many people in this world like to be unconventional? Why do many people insist on a lifestyle that is not recognized by the mainstream? Probably, they also get a kind of comfort from the outside world or from their own hearts. However, 90% of these people Jews' behavior is just a special behavior caused by the emptiness and restlessness in his heart. It mostly consists of sensationalism, but for Sudbai, this may be his own nature. There is nothing left to lose. His family, his parents, ethics, interpersonal relationships, wealth ideals, and even the last straw, the little guy, have been taken away from him. Except for himself, Sudbai there is nothing left. If even the last bit of hobbies or characteristics are wiped out, then Sudbai will really have nothing left except a stinky skin. This is reality, a very sad reality. Sudbai once went to England to seek a cure for his mental illness, but now it seems that this is the only one he has left. Very sad and helpless. Sudbai walked towards Ji Zhen step by step. He didn't know why Ji Zhen was weaker than he thought, but he knew that the reason why he killed Ji Zhen might not be because he was so annoyed with his setup, but because a kind of persistence, Ji Zhen, is the victim of this persistence. Seeing Sudbai's attitude of not even wanting to talk, Siezhen took a deep breath. He understood that the other party used his adoptive mother as a condition to let him come over. The purpose was not to hear his apology, nor to let out a sigh of relief. The other party actually wants to kill himself. When I think about what Liang Sen said before, this little detective neighbor has been completely smoothed by his own miserable life, it feels ridiculous. For some things, you can summarize the rules based on your own experience, but in the face of it, for a person who has no rules to follow, you can't guess what he is going to do next. Even when I just walked into the community, I didn't expect that I would face a real life and death fight. This time, Ji Zhen didn't let Subai take action first. His fingers began to tremble. In front of him, a Guqin emerged. This should not be Ji Zhen's natal weapon, but the aura exuded by the Guqin didn't even seem to be his natal weapon. The method is comparable. Fingertips moved, and a chilling sound suddenly sounded. Subai continued to walk forward unhurriedly, because in his eyes, even if Xie Zhen suddenly took out a divine weapon at this time, he would continue to walk forward. Then kill Qin Zhen, or be killed yourself. There is no other option, really none. The ground beneath his feet began to weather rapidly, and Subai's clothes also began to fall into an old-fashioned atmosphere, followed closely by a kind of praise to the old age of life. The curling sound of the piano brings a kind of loneliness, but also brings despair. Of course, Ji Zhen does not have the ability to reverse time. What he practices is illusion. Everything in front of him at this time is a manifestation of the illusion at its peak. Every detail and every small feeling is serving the illusion in front of him. You feel that time is passing quickly, which not only makes you, but also makes your cells feel that you are in your twilight years, so it's time to die. After being promoted to an advanced audience, the perception and connection with the surrounding space have become more sophisticated, which has also given a new definition to the skills previously possessed. For example, this move, before, Ji Zhen could never use it. Because he may be able to deceive ordinary people, but he can't deceive a determined audience, but now, he can. The sound of the piano is endless, time flies. But what has always changed is the surrounding scenery and Subai's gradually turning yellow clothes. With each passing year, the sun sets and the sun turns. Everything in the field of vision has the posture of an old photo. Even the wind has a trace of it. A scent of twilight. Only Subai didn't change at all. He continued to move forward, neither faster nor slower than before. When he walked up to Xie Zhen, he was still playing the piano, but there was a wry smile at the corner of his mouth. It wasn't until this moment that Ji Zhen finally understood that there might be a mutual conflict. What he was good at was illusions, while what Subai was good at was close combat. However, Subai had another layer of characteristics. His inner tenacity is comparable to that of a pervert, and no matter how advanced or incredible his illusions are, they cannot change the fact that they are fake. This point almost destined him to be his Achilles heel. He was firmly pinched by the opponent. The thing he was best at turned out to be the thing the opponent was least afraid of. This made Xie Zhen only smile bitterly. The confrontation between senior audience members seems to be more cruel and unreasonable. In fact, both parties have just been promoted to senior audience members, and they are very lacking in combat methods and experience at this level. Subai stood in front of Xie Zhen, looking at Xie Zhen and Qin in front of him. He was not in a hurry to attack Xie Zhen, even though the distance between the two at this time was just right for Subai's performance. Because killing Ji Zhen was the result Subai wanted, but Subai didn't enjoy the process. Subai's hands were also on the Guqin. A good tutoring and family education environment made Subai obviously versatile. If it weren't for his withdrawn character since childhood, Subai could have become one of the most dazzling ones in elementary school, middle school, and university. He knows many musical instruments, including the piano and the Guqin. However, he plays the piano much better than the Guqin. As for the Guqin, he only knows a little about it. He can play it, but he is not very in-depth about it. But for the current situation and the mission of this Guqin, playing music has become an additional attribute. Subai plucked the strings with his fingers, and a simple and monotonous sound sounded. It was very simple, just like a child who had just learned the piano practicing. But when the sound of the piano appeared, a solemn look appeared on Ji Zhen's face. In a daze, he was pulled directly into an emotion. This was an emotion he had created before, but was forcibly controlled by Subai relying on his shallow technical level. Xie Zhen didn't know why. My childhood was incomplete. The two photos appeared in Subai's mind, of himself kneeling in the corner of the family portrait and the bronze box. I have no past. The voice was hollow, but it hit people's hearts, and his hands were tied together. As a high-level listener who relied on illusions to get up to this point, today he actually fell to the point where he had to stabilize his mind and not be disturbed by other people's illusions. The pain in this may only be understood clearly if you explain yourself. My life is manipulative. I am just a puppet on strings, but I can't even see the strings on my body, and naturally I can't see the person who really controls me. So, I don't have that now. Xie Zhen suddenly understood at this moment. When Subai simply played the piano and his emotions were completely touched, Xie Zhen suddenly had an idea in his mind. He knew that Subai did not know how to use illusion. In fact, if without the blessing of his own Gukin, Subai would not be able to exert any effect at all. However, Subai used this Gukin to directly condense illusions that were more profound than his own. Because what you pursue is the appearance, and what you pursue is that all external changes will affect the other person's interior, while the other party directly pursues the heart. This is an accumulation of life experiences and a kind of precipitation in life. Perhaps, Xie Zhen is a few years older than Subai, but life is not a simple accumulation of years, but the sublimation of experience and experience. Compared with what Subai has experienced, his Xie Zhen is a bit like the same person. A clean sheet of paper. This time, as long as I don't die, as long as I can survive, with this understanding, my strength and cultivation will definitely be able to improve further. I don't know if I have a past. I can't see my past and I'm too lazy to look at it. Subai let out a sigh, and the next moment, the strings of the piano broke, and the monotonous sound of the piano suddenly stopped. At the same time, a mouthful of blood spurted out from Ji Zhen's mouth, and he half knelt on the ground slumped, with a shabby figure. Subai didn't understand illusions, so he didn't really know how to control the Gukin. Therefore, the Gukin couldn't bear Subai's simple and crude playing method and collapsed. Ji Zhen slowly raised his head, his face was pale, but he was also a little relieved. Is there really no room for change? Xie Zhen asked feebly. Our relationship is actually pretty good. Subai didn't answer because he didn't need to answer. He just continued to walk towards Xie Zhen. In a series of confrontations, Xie Zhen was completely at a disadvantage. Even Subai didn't think clearly about the reason. But this does not affect Subai's desire to get the results he wants. Kill him. Just to prove it to myself, which is tantamount to telling myself, look, I'm alive. Xie Zhen actually has many other methods, but he knows that in this level of duel, he has lost 2 games in a row, and there is almost no possibility of a comeback. The confrontation between senior listeners has long since broken away from the simple confrontation and superposition of forces by the seniors, and has become more mysterious. Ji Zhen slowly lowered his head and said with some reluctance, actually, I am really not willing to die. Then why did you give up and surrender? This sound was not made by Subai. When this sound appeared, Subai stopped in his tracks, because behind Xie Zhen, a man in a red suit appeared. The man bent down, stretched out his hand, and handed over Xie Zhen. Helped him up. You still have a good impression of him and feel that you owe him something because of your actions, so when the start is unfavorable, you are ready to give up and wait for the kill, right? Liang Sen shook his head. How silly. Subai still stood where he was. Liang Sen cast his gaze on Subai and said in a deep voice, Just accept it as you like. It's not a fight to the death. Just treat it as a favor for me. I will give you a satisfactory answer to this matter. You don't have to be so extreme. When Subai heard this, he suddenly laughed. Then he said softly, "You deserve it too." Liang Sen's pupils shrank suddenly, and the anger in his heart immediately rose. This ignorant guy in front of him was stepping on his face. Because in the place of enlightenment, when he first attained enlightenment, the tombstone he put down was directly smashed by Lichi's tombstone. The consciousness left behind by Lichi only responded, "Are you worthy?" And this guy was also present at the time. These three words were a pun at this time. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 729. What is the difference between mentally ill people and ordinary people? Ordinary people who do some unbelievable things or do some extreme things can still use "I'm talking about being a teenager" to explain it, but someone like Subai doesn't give any face or even directly steps on a big shot audience. Face's behavior can basically be attributed to someone with a brain defect. Even if a sane person is excited and wants to pursue poetry and Yuan Fang, he probably won't be able to do such a thing. "You offended me." Liang Sen suppressed his inner anger and said. He is just looking for footnotes and reasons for his next behavior, and he is also making sense. There is no way. Radio teaches people but does not discriminate. The world is unkind and treats all things as spoiled dogs, whether it is a low-level listener or a high-level listener. On the radio, in everyone's eyes, everyone is equal. So even if Liang Sen, who is a big-shot audience member, wants to take action against Subai, he must explain the truth clearly first. Many ordinary people in the real world like to quote Mr. Lu Xun's "This is a cannibalistic society." They feel that many aspects of this society are unreasonable, but they may never have thought that in this world, there is a group of people who have the power is comparable to that of gods, and they can even easily overthrow the power of a country, but they are also the most reasonable people. Before a group of gods fight or want to teach someone something they don't like, they have to set up a dragon gate formation and reason. This can be regarded as a unique scenery. "Come on, kill me." Subai pointed at his chest. "You are also involved in this matter. If you have the guts, kill me now. Don't take off your pants and fart. Do it halfway." Liang Sen's palms were veined, and the clay figurine was still very angry, let alone a boss-level audience, but Subai was right. He had plotted against Subai first, and now he was just verbally irritable. The most you can do is go over and beat him, and you can't even hurt him too much, otherwise you are being unreasonable. If you are unreasonable, then you have to be prepared for the radio to come to you and reason with you. Seeing Liang Sen's reaction, Subai showed a smile. He knew that he was a bit cheap at this time, because what restrained the other party was not his own strength, but the deterrent power of the broadcast. Moreover, Subai had long known that Liang, this person, is senator. He has seen the other party's enlightenment with his own eyes at the place of enlightenment. He is a strong man, but he has to add a prefix. He is a timid strong man. A guy who lived in the same era as Li Ji, but had to wait until now to reach enlightenment as a last resort. Ordinary timid listeners really can't do this kind of thing, because they still have to face the temptation of increasing their strength and advancing. Confused. Xie Zhen also stood up at this time. He knew Liang Sen very well. After all, the two had lived together for a long time. He could see that Liang Sen was furious now, but he was still restraining himself. But Xie Zhen didn't feel guilty or moved. Because before he flew to Jiamuzi, he solemnly told Liang Sen that he did not need to follow him, but Liang Sen came anyway and showed up at this time. Although Subai was in front of him, Xie Zhen would not be so stupid as to think that Subai didn't leave any backup for his adoptive mother, because if it were him, he would have left a backup. And Liang Sen's appearance like this was tantamount to breaking his previous agreement with Subai. Then, his adoptive mother might really be in danger. "You shouldn't have come," Xie Zhen said. "If I don't come, You will die, Liang Sen reminded. The level of confrontation between senior listeners is completely different from that of senior listeners. Although the enhanced attributes of both parties have not changed, the effects are no longer the same. On the ground, the gap between the mutually reinforcing and strengthening attributes becomes even more obvious. How useful is your illusion to him? Although Xie Zhen knew that Liang Sen was telling the truth, he still believed that Liang Sen should not have come. The Subai in front of him was a complete lunatic. His revengeful style in this matter proved that he had never changed. And Liang Sen's appearance might really allow him to kill his adoptive mother directly. Sorry, I told my boss not to come. Xie Zhen took the initiative to break away from Liang Sen's support and walk towards Subai step by step. He had to let Subai see his attitude, because he really didn't want his adoptive mother, his true relative in this world, to be separated from his nature. When people are separated, no matter how powerful the audience is, they can't bring people back to life. But he still came. Subai looked at Liang Sen and then at Xie Zhen, who was walking towards him. I left a drop of my blood on your mother, and I could blow it up at any time. Subai said calmly. Liang Sen's eyes narrowed. At this moment, he was already calculating something. Xie Zhen seemed to sense something, and immediately turned around and shouted to Liang Sen, "Boss, I don't want to take risks. Liang Sen has come here without permission." Xie Zhen really doesn't want Liang Sen to risk the safety of his loved ones again. Just as high-level listeners and senior people are two levels of existence, boss-level listeners must be the same as high-level listeners. The audience also exists on two levels. With Liang Sen's strength and the fact that his adoptive mother should be in the nearby area, Liang Sen does have a certain probability of finding his adoptive mother and rescuing her before Subai activates the drop of blood. But Ji Zhen didn't dare to gamble, nor was he willing to gamble. Plop. Xie Zhen knelt down to Subai. You know, Subai, I'm really aggrieved now. I admit that I plotted against you first, which made me fall into a passive state. But what I'm most aggrieved about is that you seem to have no one in this world. Someone I can use to threaten you. Your loved ones. Your parents. Your son? Your friend? Suner and Chu Zhao were the audience and could not be used as threats. And judging from the information Ji Zhen obtained, if he threatened those two people, Subai would probably just smile and urge Ji Zhen to take action quickly. As for Subai's parents, Xie Zhen still remembers what Subai said on the phone, "Then you also go to my mother, I won't stop you." Even if your mother knew where she was, who would dare to go? Even the boss behind him wouldn't have the guts to go. Xie Zhen knelt down towards Subai. Liang Sen's brows furrowed. In fact, he had been hesitating whether to kill Subai, but he was still hesitating, because the causal relationship could not support him from killing Subai. When you are weak, you hope this world is all reasonable, but when you are strong, you hope that this world will no longer have so many reasons. This is also human nature. Subai's palm gently rubbed his chin. This kneeling gesture of apology did not seem to move him. His expression was still as calm as when he first stood on the balcony smoking. "Haha, there's nothing you can do about it. You broke the agreement yourself." Subai said this to Ji Zhen, then turned and left. "Boss Liang, do you dare to compete with me in speed?" Liang Sen turned a deaf ear. Ji Zhen roared like crazy, "Subai, if she dies, just wait, I will definitely cut you into pieces." Subai didn't reply and disappeared. Liang Sen walked to Xie Zhen and helped Xie Zhen up. "I'm sorry." Ji Zhen closed his eyes and shook his head. "He is a lunatic. We shouldn't mess with him, because he really has nothing to worry about." Liang Sen stopped talking, because he couldn't say, "Don't worry, when your mother dies, I will immediately go over and kill Subai to avenge your mother." It is already June now, and for most parts of China, it has entered the rhythm of summer, and the south is already unbearably hot. However, it is only in the early tens in Jiamuzi, especially in the morning, and it is still a bit cool. Outside the lively vegetable market, Subai walked slowly. The hustle and bustle around him didn't seem to bother him at all. If it weren't for the fact that his purple hair was so dazzling in this era when killing people is no longer popular, it might really be, no one will notice him. Xiaobai, a middle-aged woman had just come out from the market after buying vegetables. She started waving to Subai from a distance. She was holding a vegetable basket in both hands. Xiaobai, it's really you. Come on, you came late yesterday and the vegetable market was closed. Today, Auntie, I went out early in the morning to buy vegetables. They are all fresh. I will go to Auntie's house for dinner at noon. Auntie will give me some food. You make your specialty dishes, and I guarantee they'll be delicious. Xiezhen didn't come back all year round, and he actually deliberately forgot about his adoptive mother. This was probably due to Subai's previous attitude towards the little guy. Auntie Subai called. Here, this is fresh shakima. Take a bite. It is made in an old store and is much more delicious than the one sold in supermarkets. This is the authentic shakima. Auntie, I just bought it. Auntie Xie took out a piece from the sealed bag without any explanation and brought it to Subai's mouth enthusiastically. Subai opened his mouth and took a bite. It's very thick, very glutinous, and very sweet, but not greasy. How is it? Is it delicious? Auntie Xie asked expectantly. Yeah, it's delicious. Let's go home with Auntie. Let's make some hard dishes today. In our place, the really delicious dishes are not in restaurants, but at home. I don't know about Auntie, but Xiezhen has come back. I have some urgent matters in the company, so I will go to the airport soon. What, Xiezhen is back, Aunt Xie said in surprise. Yes, he is back and is waiting for you at home. I'll leave now. I'll come back next time to eat the food cooked by my aunt. After Subai finished speaking, he broke away from the understanding aunt's hand and entered the crowd. Hey, you kid, no matter how anxious you are, you won't miss this meal. Aunt Ji still wanted to find Subai, but found that she couldn't find it no matter how hard she looked. However, when she thought that her son, who had not been home for several years, was back, she immediately became happy again. She even extravagantly called for a tricycle to save some time and go early. Go home. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 730. Passengers taking China Eastern Airlines MU 5615, please note that we are sorry to inform you that your flight will not be able to arrive on time due to weather conditions. Please pay attention to our notice. We sincerely apologize for the inconvenience caused to you due to flight delays. You apologize. After getting the ticket, passing the security check, and sitting in the terminal for about half an hour, Subai received the news that the flight was delayed. Subai simply stood up, walked into the smoking area, took out a cigarette, and lit it. On one side of the smoking room is a tobacco and liquor store. There are several female employees who are dressed like subway trains but should not be subway trains selling cigarettes to the smokers coming and going. Their checkout counters are also in the smoking area. Subai leaned over and smoked a cigarette while watching them. To be honest, these little girls were quite pitiful. Even if he was a senior smoker, if he had to stand in a smoking room full of smoke for 10 hours a day, he would probably be embarrassed. I can't stand it either. These little girls are constantly smoking second-hand smoke whenever they go to work. But the business was pretty good. There were a lot of people buying cigarettes, and many of them bought them one by one. The little girls were very busy and excited. Subai threw the cigarette butt into the keg and walked out. He didn't know when the plane would arrive, so the free time seemed a bit boring. Furthermore, Subai didn't know many listeners, otherwise since he came to the Northeast, visiting him would be a good way to spend time. Opposite the smoking area is a local specialty store. With the popularity of e-commerce, specialty products seem to be no longer as popular as before. Many people go out to buy specialties, bring them back in large and small bags, and then go to the store. A search on Dobeo revealed that they are all sold online, and the prices are even cheaper. "Hello sir." A woman stopped Subai. Subai turned around and saw a blonde woman wearing a shirt and jeans standing in front of him. The woman was wearing a pair of sunglasses, covering most of her face. "Is something wrong?" Subai asked. "Sir, are you alone?" The blonde woman pointed to the boarding gate. "I saw you sitting there waiting for the flight before." "I was also waiting for that flight, but unfortunately, it was delayed." "Excuse me, what do you mean?" Subai still didn't understand what this woman was thinking. She was not an audience, which Subai was sure of. "Can I invite you to dinner? There is a dessert shop over there," the woman invited. "I'm sorry, ma'am, I don't know you." Subai didn't believe that he would encounter any romantic encounters. If it was his previous self, wearing fashionable clothes customized by masters, then it would be reasonable for a woman to take the initiative to stick to her. But now that I have purple hair and clothes that only cost a few dozen or $100, it's not normal for a woman to come here. "Please don't get me wrong, I just want to treat you to a meal," the woman invited again. "As a man, are you still afraid that I will eat you?" "Sorry, I don't have time and I'm not hungry." Subai waved his hand and walked into the bookstore next door. He glanced at the magazines. There were not many magazines in the bookstore and there was very little room for selection. However, the business should be good. After all, you can't play on the plane. With mobile phones, many people indeed choose to buy a magazine and read it on the plane. However, the woman actually followed him into the bookstore, still standing behind Subai. "Madam, what are you going to do?" Subai asked, grabbing a car magazine. "You must go to dinner with me," the woman said firmly. This firm tone and such a blunt tone made it impossible for people to associate her with wine and food trays. In addition, this was still an airport and not a bar street outside. "Okay, let's eat together." The woman nodded and walked into a ramen shop in front. "Didn't you say you want dessert?" Subai sat down at a small table, and the woman sat down opposite Subai. "The same." The woman took off her sunglasses, revealing her complete face, which looked pretty good and delicate. "Are you mixed race?" Subai asked. "Yes, my mother is Chinese and my father is British," the woman replied. "Oh," Subai responded and ordered a Dawan beef ramen and a small bowl of beef ramen. He took out the money to pay the bill first. Food at the airport is really expensive. "Sir, you don't seem to be in need of money," the woman said. "Do you see anything about me that makes me look like a rich person?" "It's the same everywhere, because you have no concept or awareness of money, which means that for you, money is just a string of Arabic numerals, and you cannot associate it with daily necessities, rice, oil, and salt." Subai leaned on the chair and looked at the woman in front of him, observe her very carefully. Subai didn't bother to ask this woman what her purpose was. Anyway, if she continued to annoy him after eating the ramen, Subai wouldn't have the patience to continue playing with her. "Sir, you will thank me," the woman said this inexplicably. "What do you think of human destiny?" "It's destined," Subai replied perfunctorily. This woman wants to talk philosophy with herself? The woman smiled slightly. "Then do you think it can be changed?" "It's a boring question, a very bad street question." Subai now feels that this woman is not preaching. I remember seeing a news 2 years ago. A few idiots were preaching in McDonald's and asked for the mobile phone numbers and phone numbers of nearby diners. One of the women refused to give them a name. As a result, the woman was beaten to death in McDonald's. Judging from the words and deeds of the mixed-race lady in front of him now, who is determined to follow him and invite him to dinner and sit at the table, it is very likely that she really intends to preach to him. Sudbai subconsciously touched his chin, recalling that when he was sitting on the chair in the terminal waiting for the plane, could it be said that he looked decadent and suicidal? So he has attracted the attention of cultists and plans to absorb himself, a lost lamb in real life, into the organization? The ramen came, and Sudbai put some chili oil in the bowl in front of him. When he was about to eat, the woman spoke again. "Sir, you haven't answered my question yet. Do you know what the future will be like?" Sudbai replied after taking a bite of noodles. The woman pretended to smile reservedly. Sudbai was happy. Could it be that he was really recruited into the religion? Even if you know what the future will look like, what can you use to verify whether the future you see is real or fake? Sudbai continued. Just have confidence in yourself, the woman said matter-of-factly. No matter how confident you are, you will have doubts about yourself. No matter how good you are at studying, you still need to find someone else to check the questions after the exam to confirm whether you are right or wrong. I can't understand your thinking. Why do people doubt and deny themselves? Because one wrong move could lead to an abyss. There was very little noodles, so Sudbai took a few big bites and fished them out with chopsticks a few times, and that was enough. Put down the chopsticks. Okay, I'm done eating, ma'am, goodbye. Sudbai felt that he had said enough to the other party, which was probably the reason why he was in a good mood now. The woman's face barely moved, but she still stood up and followed Sudbai out of the noodle shop. A cigarette after a meal is better than a living god. In fact, it is very simple to judge whether a person is addicted to smoking. That is whether he has the thought of smoking after a meal. Although nicotine has no effect on Sudbai at all, Sudbai still subconsciously went to the smoking area. The woman ran over and grabbed Sudbai's wrist with one hand. You can't go in, at least not now. He. Sudbai took out his hand and continued walking to the smoking area. You should tell me why I can't go in. Something will happen to you when you go in. I saw the chandelier above your head falling down, the woman said seriously. Oh, Sudbai slowly stopped. This time, he seriously re-examined the woman in front of him. If she is not a liar, a brain problem or a delusion, then, does she have the special ability to see future scenes? Cause and effect is a delicious poison to the audience, but as long as the level of life is high enough, one can understand cause and effect. This also means that human beings, as the top creatures of all things, do their souls have the ability to understand cause and effect? Genes. If this is the case, then it doesn't seem to be too surprising that one or two people occasionally pop up among ordinary people who can see the future. After all, the probability is 1 in hundreds of millions. But Sudbai still walked into the smoking area. He took out his cigarette and lit it on the cigarette lighter. He blew out a smoke ring and looked outside. The woman stood outside through the automatic sensor glass door and looked at Sudbai. And then looked at the top of Sudbai's head. Sudbai raised his head. Yo! What a coincidence. I just casually picked up a cigarette, lit it, took 2 steps, and there happened to be a chandelier above my head. Just when Sudbai raised his head. Crack. A crisp sound. The chandelier fell. The woman closed her eyes. She didn't dare to look at the scene that was about to happen. At the same time, the woman clenched her hands tightly and kept complaining in her heart. Why don't you believe what I say is true? Why do you still want to commit suicide one by one? Why can't you believe me? Why do I have to be soft-hearted again and again, knowing that they won't listen? But I can't help but remind myself why. Snapped. The chandelier shattered, screams of surprise came from all around, and the smokers inside were startled. At this time, the glass sensor door opened, and the woman felt that there was a person standing in front of her. She opened her eyes and saw Subai, who was unharmed. Beautiful lady, you didn't even eat a bite of noodles just now. As a gentleman, I think I should treat you to some desserts. Are you right? Terror Broadcast. Author, Chunji Dixiaolong. Chapter 731. In the end, the dessert was not finished, and the announcement was broadcast over the radio in the airport that the delayed plane had finally arrived and passengers could start boarding. Subai and the woman checked in and entered the plane side by side. Both of them had economy class tickets, but one was at the front and the other was almost at the back. Subai did not ask to change seats, but sat in the second to last row by the window. After sitting down, he had no luggage. After sitting down, he closed his eyes and prepared to rest. Hello, sir, he is my friend. Can I change places with you? I'm really sorry. Originally, the man sitting next to Subai was a man about 40 years old. Faced with the request of a mixed-race beauty, the man simply stood up and agreed to change seats. Soon, the fragrant smell of perfume spread to the tip of Subai's nose. Subai opened his eyes, looked at the woman beside him and smiled. I thought you were going to ask the people around me to change places, but I didn't expect it was the other way around. The woman seemed a little surprised. Ordinary people would be surprised first when they learned about their abilities, and then they would take the initiative to come over and talk to them. Make friends with yourself. Don't get me wrong. I only wanted to treat you to dessert to thank you for your kindness. There are really not many such kind-hearted people in this world. Regardless of whether this woman has any special identity or conspiracy, the other party's previous initiative to force her to have dinner and prevent her from going to the smoking area was a help to herself. Regardless of whether Subai needed it or not, at least you need to show your kindness to yourself. The woman stretched out her hand. Introduce yourself. My name is Yang Shui, this is my Chinese name. Subai. Subai stretched out his hand and shook her gently. I really think you are so strange. Yang Shui seemed to be full of curiosity about Subai. You make me confused. Actually, I'm just a little gangster. Subai waved his hand. By the way, let me remind you, don't use your ability indiscriminately. Sometimes, some things will not change. How do you know it can't be changed? Yang Shui said angrily, it must be changeable. Why are you so insistent? Subai looked at Yang Shui with some surprise. This woman seemed to have a stubborn paranoia about whether the future could change. Because I saw a scene. On the day of my mother's 60th birthday, my mother suddenly died of a heart attack at the dinner table. I hope I can change it, and I must change it. So just now, you gave me hope. Because you are not dead. Subai suddenly wanted to say, you just saw the scene of the chandelier falling above my head, and you didn't see the scene of my tragic death. Not to mention the chandelier, even if the missile fell down, I probably wouldn't die. But after thinking about it, Subai still felt that it didn't make much sense to analyze so much at this time. Let her wait for her mother's death with despair? But, if you think about it from another angle, she tried her best to change everything, but the reality still happened in the end. Will the blow be bigger? No matter which choice, no matter which attitude, it seems painful. Subai himself didn't know when he started to feel disgusted with the future. On the one hand, it might be because of the relationship between cause and effect, and on the other hand, similar things had happened around him. The auspicious painting reminded him several times. What will happen to him in the future? At least, the scenes in the prediction screen have happened. Especially for Sunur, Subai worked hard and tried his best. Even if the final result was a twist, at least the scene in the picture appeared. If Subai had to choose again, he would really. You may choose to give up because it's too tiring and you don't have absolute confidence at all. Subai is definitely not a person who pursues the highest principles as his life goal. He pursues power not to explore the nature of the world, nor to overthrow the reactionary rule of radio. He actually lives a very simple and pure life. He needed strength because he wanted to twist the heads of the man and woman off. Very few people would take pure hatred as their goal in life, but Subai didn't seem to have much else left. If he didn't even have hatred, then living like this would really be meaningless. I don't often see this scene. In fact, as long as I can remember, I have seen this scene less than 20 times, maybe once or at most twice a year. When I was about to save them, but they didn't listen to me. Until now, no one, including you, has ever listened to me. They all treat me like a madman. Later, when I was 17 years old, I knew that my own abilities might bring inconvenience to my life, so I became accustomed to maintaining restraint and indifference to the unexpected deaths of strangers. It wasn't until last year when I saw the scene that my mother would die suddenly on her 60th birthday that I really panicked. I wanted to change, I wanted to try to change, so I saw the scene once at the beginning of this year. I wanted to stop a man from crossing the road, but he was a thief who was being chased by the police. He pushed me away, pushed me to the ground, and even cut my arm with a knife. He crossed the road and was caught by a big car. The truck hit him directly. Speaking of this, Yang Shui suddenly smiled and said, "The police station also issued me a certificate of courage to serve the citizens." Haha, hearing this, Subai couldn't help but laugh. It was indeed very interesting. Both of them have seen great horrors. Although Yang Shui's experience can only be regarded as trivial compared to Subai's, you must know that Yang Shui has always witnessed it as an ordinary person, while Subai is, as time goes by, it begins to become stronger, and therefore, things that used to be scary are just so in the eyes of Subai now. For example, if the early paper man story world is placed in the eyes of Subai now, it's really no different from a child playing house. Only those who have experienced hardship truly know what it means to enjoy hardship. "You are the second time I have seen you this year," Yang Shui said seriously. "You gave me confidence, thank you." Subai stretched out his hand and touched Yang Shui's blonde hair. This mixed-race girl was indeed stunningly beautiful. Actually, it doesn't mean much if it doesn't change. Subai thought about it and felt that he still had to say something. The other party kindly reminded himself that although the chandelier did not pose a threat to him, this favor was still a bit. "I think that instead of trying to avoid the curse of sudden death on your mother's 60th birthday, you should put more thought into making her live a fulfilling and happy life from now until her 60th birthday. I think your age, your mother is probably in her early 50s, she still has enough time, and there is no need to put your mind completely in that place, but ignore the essence of life. I didn't expect you to be so good at giving chicken soup." Yang Shui tidied her hair. Obviously, she was still a little concerned about Subai's slightly frivolous behavior just now. "It's not chicken soup." Subai slid his hand down, turned his palm, and a sign made of wild boar skin appeared in Subai's hand. "This is something from the shaman, right? You are also capable, and you can actually make it? You got this. This brand is made of wild boar skin." Subai doesn't know how it is made, but the fact that it can emit some spiritual power already shows its value. It can be regarded as a magic weapon. "Bar. You. Give it back to me." Yang Shui snatched the sign from Subai's hand. "This thing is useless if used to control the house. In ancient times, some veterans and generals had committed too many murders in the past, so they needed this thing to control the house in their later years to prevent the people they killed before from turning into ghosts. You are harassing yourself in your later years when your energy are weak. Your mother was not a mercenary before, so she does not need this. Instead, this thing will affect the magnetic field at home and cause a certain burden on people's bodies." "Are you telling the truth?" Yang Shui said hesitantly. "She spent a lot of money to get this sign. Believe it or not, it's up to you." If this is the case, Yang Shui was very helpless. She came to the northeast this time just for this reason, because she took her mother for a physical examination. There was nothing wrong with her mother's health, and her mother was 57 years old this year, which meant that she still had no health problems. She would die suddenly in 3 years. Even if she didn't have a birthday party for her, Yang Shui knew that her mother would still have physical problems, so she began to seek help from another level. Let's see. I have a friend who is an eminent monk and lives in Shanghai. You can take your mother to visit him. Remember my mobile phone number. Then you can add me on WeChat first. It's not that Sudbai suddenly became enthusiastic, but because Sudbai himself was not very interested in this, but the monk and Buddha would probably be very interested in this woman, certainly not her body. Thank you. I have a pen here. Please report it and I will remember it. Sudbai reported his number, and Yang Shui also remembered it. When Sudbai felt that he could close his eyes and rest for a while, he heard Yang Shui sitting next to him suddenly ask again. By the way, do you like cats? Black cats? Why do you ask? Because in the picture I saw before, there was a black cat on the ceiling, and it pushed the chandelier down. The prediction picture I saw only turned out to be correct, but in reality there may be discrepancies in the background, so I'm not so naive as to think that my mother will not die suddenly if I don't give her a birthday party. Why are you telling me now? Sudbai's fist suddenly clenched. He really had the urge to strangle this woman to death.